old marketing wisdom that needs to change. Peter Derk is an interesting character. I have no connection to him other than we both occasionally write for. I occasionally write for LitReactor. He has lots of articles every month. But Peter Derk is interesting. He is not online, as far as I can tell, so I can't ever tag him in social media when I share all these. LitReactor shares the articles, though. And he has some interesting ideas of sort of bucking the system and looking at things in a different way. I don't always agree with everything he says. I do see the value in what he's saying and can apply what I agree with to my own process. But he does have ways of seeing things differently from how I see them, and very often takes to task the conventional wisdoms. Bill Veeck was a baseball team owner who did some crazy shit. He held a game where the fans used cards to vote on the team's strategy throughout the game while the team's manager sat in a rocking chair. He gave away livestock at games, including one time a horse. And Bill Veeck made a lot of moves that changed baseball for the better. Bill was the first person to bring up the idea of selling Yankee caps to the general public. He was the first one to suggest that instead of selling tickets for an entire series, each game could have its own ticket. He also hired the first black player in the American League, Larry Doby. And after 3 players on the team refused to shake Doby's hand, Bill fired them. Sometimes received wisdom is awesome. It gives you a head start on something, but sometimes received wisdom, those "this is just the way we do it" things, like saying it would be stupid to sell Yankee caps or have black people and white people play baseball together, isn't really wisdom at all. It's malarkey, bullshit, nonsense someone was told and now they're telling you. The best way to check received wisdom is to test it. Step outside what you're told and give it a whirl. Let's step out into the world of book marketing wisdom and see what we can shake loose. And again, this is probably what he does best, is kind of pulling the rug out from under something and seeing if it still stands. Balance pushiness and humility when selling your book. Now, this is a cool one because it's sort of that balance that we always call brand, where it's like, who are you online? What are people willing to get from you, and how much of that do you give before you put up a book link and that kind of thing. And so it's kind of this like weird balance between buy my book but then still being humble. And here's what Peter Derk has to say about it. Worst advice: most writers need to be more pushy. You'll always have a pushy a-hole who just can't shut up about his book, but you know what? He'll be like that no matter what you tell him. Meanwhile, there are a ton of you who can stand to be a hell of a lot pushier. Here's how to know you're pushing the right amount. Exceed the right amount. Be told by someone who cares about you and loves you and knows you well that you're being too pushy. Then back it up 2 steps. So I guess he's talking about it doesn't hurt to test your boundary a little bit. Next section, sell your book as X crossed with Y. Don't sell your book as X crossed with Y unless X and Y is a new interesting idea or intriguing combo. When you tell me it's Hunger Games crossed with Twilight, that tells me nothing. The gap between those books is like the gap between stones on the Egyptian pyramids, not even wide enough to slip in a piece of paper. When you tell me it's Infinite Jest crossed with a prayer for Owen Meany, now I just feel like you're telling me about all the books you've read, not the one you wrote. If it's a book that's like Michael Bay directing Sleepless in Seattle, you've got my attention. 50 Shades meets Jurassic Park, okay, I'm listening. But don't bother giving me the touch points with no distance and nothing interesting happening in between. That space is between your space in between your touch points is where your book lives. If that gap is too narrow, I'll read the 2 already established polls and call it good. All right, I kind of agree with that. I've never been a big fan of that idea of my book is this crossed with that. Sometimes I'll use that when describing someone else's book, but I don't do that with mine very often. No need for buying beyond the book. Why do bands have merch tables? Because A, it's an easy way to make some money, and B, some people buys the band shirt. When someone buys the band shirt, they're turned into a walking billboard. Why aren't you offering something to buy beyond the book, both as revenue and as marketing? Even if it's as simple as an enamel pen, A new one exclusive to every title. That's something. Looks Lots of books have a workbook or a themed journal alongside them. Why not yours? Jesus, it takes 30 minutes and $0 to get a print on demand t-shirt going. Maybe you only sell one. That's fine. That's a couple bucks in your pocket and one walking billboard out in the world. I do think there's something to the idea, and of course, me saying this on Twitch is an example of how I'm doing it, I guess. That idea of expanding out what it means to be a writer and what it means to market yourself and what it means to connect with an audience and build a community and all these type of things that we didn't normally associate with writing when it's just, buy a book, sell it to a publisher, put it out to the public. You have to space out your books. Okay, so the wisdom here is that you put too many books together at once, and you're not going to you're going to overwhelm your audience. Is what he's coming up against. So Peter Derk says about this: publishers will space out an author's work even if the author has finished material ready to go. The wisdom here is that they want a full sales cycle for each title without overlapping. Let's talk about why that's dumb. For one, fans can definitely read as fast as authors can write. Two, when you find a new author and you've got a shitload of books out, it's an exciting moment. Three, when you've got everyone's attention with book A, why lose it before you put out book B? Four, James Patterson. All right, so I kind of ran against this wisdom in 2020 by accident. I'd done a few things. One was I wrote all 3 books in a trilogy for a young adult fantasy series, and my plan was to put all 3 out at once. So I released that in 2020, and in my mind I counted it as one release because all 3 books came out at once, but technically I'd published 3 books. I had a Time Travel Academy middle grades book that I was planning to put out in 2021, but the young adult series did so well that I went ahead and put out the first 3 books. I'd written all 3, and we're going to put them out at once in the following year, but I went ahead and put them out in 2020 because that had done well, so those did well. So in the end, I ended up with 10 books out because two of the releases were really 3 books all at once. So that was 6 books, but in my mind I was thinking of it as one release, and they all did pretty well. I think there was, at the moment when the pandemic started, there were a few people looking for stuff to read, and I think I cashed in on that. So I kind of hit a wave of sales with that. Now I can't do 10 books every year. Some of that was stuff that was meant for a future year, and some of it was stuff that I'd written earlier and was releasing there. It seems like most indies, at least in genres other than indie horror, do rapid release model. There are a lot that do that, and there are some people that are moving away from it. I think one of the upsides of the rapid release model is that idea of like when you're small time, and I don't mean that as an insult, but when you're small time, but you build a niche audience. So every book you sell every book you write is going to have a definite amount of sales because you have a certain number of people that are going to buy every book. And there's a few authors that a lot of the A-list people wouldn't even know that are making 6 figures a year, and doing it by that model, that idea that they have a relatively small audience that's fiercely loyal, and every book they put out will sell. So to make that work for a living, they got to do that rapid release, and then of course other people are trying to catch on to that. So I guess traditional publishing moves away from it, and indie publishing historically has leaned into it a good bit. Okay, social media is God. Now I know for a fact Peter Derk does not believe in this because he doesn't do social media, and the only place I can find him is LitReactor. Social media is God. The longer we bow to social media as the end-all be-all, the more it becomes the end-all be-all. Appear on podcasts, make videos, write columns, design apparel, put your jokes on Patreon, try something else. I'm not telling you you can't use social media to market your books. I'm telling you that if your entire marketing plan, whatever it's on, whether it's one you came up with or one your marketer came up with, hinges on social media, you should ask some hard questions. And if you turn over all the marketing power to social media for this book. Don't be surprised when your options start disappearing before you can sell the next one. Peter wrote an entire article just on whether or not we really need social media. That's a good one too. So you can search LitReactor and find all kinds of things that he's written, kind of pushing back against conventional wisdom mostly. All right, a couple more here. Let's court professional reviewers. Courting pros is fine, but you might get further courting bookstagrammers, booktubers, and so on. You can probably get more out of them with less input, and they're more fun to work with anyway, because they don't act stuck like suck-up jerks who are doing you a gigantic favor by reviewing your books. I've know a lot of really good book reviewers and the people who do it on Instagram and YouTube, and I think they're both fine. I don't know a lot of stuck up people in either place. Professional reviewers, meaning people in the New York Times and shit. Okay, I don't know anybody at that level. Speak to the same people over and over again. Reaching out to a larger group of people, each with a small following, gives you more diverse audience, which is great for cultivating diehard fans. And it puts your book in front of people who wouldn't see it in Publishers Weekly. So I think that's good advice. Oprah doesn't put books like this in her book club. Changing the material to suit sales is no longer the name of the game. The most famous example I know of is the removal of a pretty intense section from the original manuscript of For Wild by Cheryl Strayed. Supposedly her editor told her this wasn't going in the book because Oprah does not pick books where the author jerks off her own grandfather. I actually know that story. It was Chuck Palahniuk was talking about that. So it was a pretty intense scene in the book, and they took it off. They took it out of the book. Writing a book isn't an act of marketing, and marketing isn't about adapting the creation to be sellable. It's about having something great thrown on your desk and figuring out how to demonstrate its greatness to everyone else. The author tour is dead is the last section here. Post-COVID, you need to get back out on the author tour game. People are going to be hungry for anything that happens that isn't in front of a screen. Author tours are expensive and they suck for the author, but damn it, they build a fan base. That's an interesting point. I don't know how accurate it is about like that being worth the money, but it is kind of an interesting idea that the when this pandemic lifts, there is going to be a hunger for events. So looking at conventions and things of that nature, there may be bigger attendance in some of those places, at least for a little while. How that translates into sales and how you can leverage that, like if you do specific author events places and people are like, well, I'm willing to do anything, so they'll come see you more likely. That's a possibility I hadn't considered. I don't know what to do with that yet, but maybe we'll figure it out as hopefully 2021 leads us into a stage where COVID-19 is a thing of the past.